What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. Welcome back to another episode on my segment on this channel called Classic Albums Revisited, which is a segment that I review albums I consider to be all-time favourites. And what I'm going to talk about for this album review is one album that holds a lot of personal and special attachments with me. This is not only just a double album masterpiece, and not just one that I have mentioned more than a few times previously on my channel. This is one album I do consider to be one of the greatest albums ever made. Today I'm going to be reviewing the debut studio album from American producer, turntablist, instrumental, hip-hop, trip-hop artist DJ Shadow, entitled Endtroducing. This album was released on the 16th of September 1996 and it was released on the Moax Records label. DJ Shadow produced the album by himself. Hip-hop and trip-hop are very different genres, but they have their own stylistic approachments in their own separate ways. I have actually really enjoyed quite a lot of records in these genres. Some of my all-time favourite albums are around these two separate scenes. Massive Attack's debut of Blue Lines, Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, and Beastie Boys' first two albums, Paul's Boutique being known as their best album, but my favourite is the debut, Licensed to Ill. When it comes to these sounds of music, I have always thought that the beats were creative and full of this excitement and adrenaline, and especially with the lyricism that are either political or full of humour, and it's got their own distinctive way of expression. However, when it comes to this album, Endtroducing is nothing like those albums I've mentioned. And this was another one of those albums that I did not expect to be fully attached with very fast. When I first discovered this album, I was around 20 years old. So when I first listened to this album, I was in that mood of like, wow, what did I discover? It wasn't a mind of like, I didn't know that this would be a thing. Of course it has been a thing, because not only Endtroducing is an album that still stands the test of time, I think it is one of those albums that did grow the pioneering direction. This album is 63 minutes long, and I will have to definitely recommend this album for any music fanatic. If they haven't discovered this album, you are in for listening to an experience, because that's what this one is. Endtroducing is a very special album for me because it's not one album that's a part of my music DNA. It is as a great, rewarding and heavily atmospheric album that it fits in for me in different moods emotionally. I would listen to this album all the way through. I've listened to it millions of times and I've never ever got burnt out from it, because there's loads of detail and stuff to unpackage with this review. Endtroducing is always one of those albums that does become so relevant in terms of how profoundly different and unique this album was. In this style of music, there's no other album like it. There are other albums, you may say, that have been created that existed before this, but I think with my own first time journey of Endtroducing, to listen to it for the first time, I knew that this was going to be a very special release. Josh Davis, aka DJ Shadow, when he was a high school student, he did experiment before by making music from different samples with a 4-track recorder. The album that inspired him to create sample-based music was one of the albums I've mentioned, Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. He started his career as a disc jockey in 1989 for KDVS, a radio station from the University of California, and Dave Funkin Klein signed him to the Hollywood Basic label. DJ Shadow made tracks like Entropy in 1993, and he was involved with the underground hip-hop group called Soulsides that was founded 2 years previously in 1991. His work attracted attention of people like James Lavelle, who founded the Mo Wax record label. DJ Shadow was signed. Shadow's first 2 singles were Influx and Lost and Found SFL for the label. They were made from used bin vinyl records, and the sounds of the music were combined through different genres of funk, jazz, ambient, soul, and rock, amongst many different ones. It was a moment that some audiences would think as that this is a growing populating genre called trip-hop, and it was coined by Mixmag journalist Andy Pemberton. After that, through the artistic vision of DJ Shadows, that was the beginning for him to create the Endtroducing album. He developed the album heavily to match the sounds and to also build the feeling from what he did before, and he delivered this gem of an album. That is a great word, because when you listen to it, this album does attract a lot of attention, as it was really descriptive from the moment you listen to this album, right from the beginning to the end. To think of just a few words to describe this album, that is really difficult. There's loads of things going on around this album. I was so surprised by how incredible and amazing this one is. The gear he used for the album were an Akai MPC60 sampler, a Technics SL1200 turntable, and an Alesis ADAT tape recorder. Tons of the album's samples were used from various vinyl records during his trip to Rare Records in Sacramento, California, and he spent many hours inside the store searching for music. The album cover is a photograph that's taken at the same place by Brian Cross, aka B+, showing producer Chief XL and rapper Lyrics Born, the latter wearing a wig, who, like DJ Shadow, was a member of Soulsides. Benny B, wearing a baseball cap, is also seen in the whole photograph, and he was credited in the album's liner notes. These compositions had been so long and progressive that you would just get lost into this separate magical world, in this unique and adventurous, open-minded choice of music that you decide to listen to. Endtroducing's whole composition work had been fully complex in the making, and I think DJ Shadow did achieve that so successfully. There was no other album that I would have discovered in something very much like this. Of course, there are other albums that maybe would have at least grown the birth of this style of music. But if you guys want to recommend me different albums in this type of genre, let me know in the comments. The instrumentation around the album can be really, really exploring, because I have explored loads of these different sounds all at once, and it's not just an album that has everything but sampled. It feels like actual compositions that were created with a separate mood, a lot of the tracks are heavily focused so intentionally with the feeling, as I've addressed earlier on, because that's what was the biggest main ambition that DJ Shadow wanted to build very well, and he masterfully completed that. The variety from the start to the finish across this album is endless. It's non-stop. The beats that were achieved, whether they are an ongoing form of their loops to heavily edited to make them full of this staccato hook to it, but to still keep everything in time, has been professionally made. It is an advanced thing to do, to make an entirety of a sampled piece of music, to be making a strong composition. The beats around these long tracks can be so rhythmic, full of versatility. There are sounds from them that can go fun and energetic. It does add a lot of that adrenaline rush, but then there are some that can go to be absolutely loud and ballistic and quite frantic. No matter what these tracks can give you, the way they've been constructed and highly produced, the other additional pieces of used sounds of the piano, like with Building Steam with a Grain of Salt, to Midnight in a Perfect World, keyboards, like with Changeling and Stem Long Stem, these separate tracks are mesmerizing and gorgeous. I adored these types of compositions. They have their own separate, spaced out, loose, ongoing jams, ambience, the soundscapes. I would have to think that it does feel quite as emotionally moving and motivational, like with tracks of Stem Long Stem and one of the biggest tracks on the album, if not the most popular one, as I've mentioned, Midnight in a Perfect World. It does sound incredibly somber and melancholic, bittersweet, that it does sound as beautiful. You would not expect to hear sampled music that can give you a lot of the heart, the whole emotional depth and connection. The longer tracks are personally the highlights on here, but when it goes into the less beautiful and more in-your-face, over-the-top tracks, Mutual Slump is a very good example of this. It just assaults you from the moment it starts. The booming is so intensifying, but it does have like a really crazy amount of glitchy electronic type of sounds, through scratching of vinyl to screaming saxophones that just wail through the high notes and the mysteriousness of the spoken word. The Number Song is another outstanding composition, which is as consistent through the wild drumming and the rumbling bass that's actually pitch shifted to give this sound where it's ominous and as impending all at once. The longest track on this album is Napalm Brain Scatterbrain, and just like with Stem Long Stem, this is almost 9.5 minutes long. Napalm Brain Scatterbrain is just as a fantastic highlight on the album. You hear the consistency of the funky, clean wah-wah guitars, and there was that switch, this transition to another beat, and as it goes forward towards the end, the keyboards come in and you think it's going to go off into some uncomfortable tension and some suspense, but it doesn't do that. Like with the clean guitars, the keyboards remain quite a lot and it eases, fades out so gently and comfortably. If you do want to know the entirety with the list of samples that DJ Shadow used, I do recommend looking into them. And I didn't want to reveal them here because I thought it would have taken away the mystique identity that is this album. It is a mysterious album coming from, at first, a not revealed figure. But some of the samples that he used are actually some from legendary bands and artists that I do admire. I have always loved a lot of my time listening to this album, and it will always stay true to me as an important album personally, and as well as to think that it is as a distinctive, unique piece of modern music artistry. That's personally all I would like to say about Endtroducing by DJ Shadow. There was a lot that I wanted to describe and to talk about, and I had a blast reviewing this album for you guys. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. Is this an all-time favourite for you? Where did you discover this album? I would love to hear your own comments with the experiences that you guys have had with this album. Thank you guys for watching, and I will keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.